We've been talking about trades a lot on the channel recently. A couple of weeks ago, I made a video talking about some NHL stars that I think will likely be traded this offseason. Earlier this week, we did a deal or no deal, and yesterday we talked about the most likely trade destinations for Nikolai Ehlers. So if you guys missed any of that content, be sure to go check it out. But today we're going to be continuing the trade-themed content. For this video, I made up a list of some young NHL players that I believe could really benefit from a change of scenery for various different reasons. As always, I want to know what you guys are thinking, so if there's any players that I didn't mention in this video that you think could use a change of scenery, be sure to let me know who those players are and why down below in the comments. And if this is your first time coming across the channel and you want NHL content just like this all throughout the year, hit that subscribe button. We just recently hit 77,000, so thank you guys for that. So with that all being said, let's go ahead and kick the video off with the first player on my list. We have Philip Broberg, 22-year-old defenseman for the Edmonton Oilers. He was their first round draft pick, 8th overall back in 2019. Philip Broberg has had an absolute roller coaster of a year. Coming into the season, he was competing for the 6th and final spot on the Oilers blue line with veteran Vincent Desharnais. Desharnais obviously ended up earning that final spot, and Broberg only got into 12 games this season with the Oilers, and in those 12 games he played very limited minutes. Early in the season, it was reported that Philip Broberg and his camp have become very frustrated with the Edmonton Oilers, and I believe it was actually Frank Saravelli who reported that the Oilers gave Broberg's agent permission to seek out a trade, a report that was later shot down by Oilers GM Ken Holland. There was quite a bit of talk about Broberg leading up to the trade deadline this past season. As we know now, he obviously did not end up getting moved and played out the majority of the season in the American Hockey League for Bakersfield, where he had a fantastic year. After the conclusion of the American Hockey League season, Philip Broberg was recalled by the Edmonton Oilers. They decided to carry him on the roster for the postseason, and he didn't get into any playoff action throughout the first couple of rounds. Finally got an opportunity to be inserted into the lineup in Game 4 against Dallas and hasn't looked back. He played in Games 4, 5, and 6 against the Stars, scored a big goal in Game 5, and considering how the Oilers closed out that series against Dallas, you have to imagine they're going to keep the lineup the same heading into the Stanley Cup Finals, a lineup that had Philip Broberg in it. So things are going pretty well for Broberg right now. Maybe this wasn't the best time to make this video and have Broberg included in my list. However, already looking ahead, the Edmonton Oilers have 5 defensemen signed through next season, 5 guys that are all expected to be mainstays on the blue line: Darnell Nurse, Matthias Ekholm, Evan Bouchard, Cody Ceci, and Brett Kulak. So heading into next season, there's a good chance Broberg could find himself in the same position that he found himself in heading into this past season, where he's competing with someone for that 6th and final spot on the Oilers blue line. And if yet again Broberg is not able to crack the Oilers roster on a full-time basis coming out of training camp next season, I could definitely see a scenario based off of the things that were reported earlier this season where Philip Broberg wants to be traded and wants to go somewhere where he'll get an opportunity to play consistent minutes in the NHL. Moving on now to the next player on my list, we have Kaapo Kakko, a 22-year-old winger, the Rangers' 2nd overall draft pick from 2019. This past season was a real struggle for Kaapo Kakko. He started off slow with just 2 points through his first 15 games, ended up missing a decent chunk of the season with an injury, and wound up finishing the year with career lows in points per game and ice time per game. Now don't get me wrong, even when he's not producing offensively, Kaapo Kakko is still a useful bottom 6 winger. His defensive game has came along nicely, he's a decent forechecker, but that's obviously not why he was selected 2nd overall in 2019. This is a guy who is expected to come in and be a game breaker for the New York Rangers, a legit top line forward, and we just have not seen that at the NHL level. Not really anything close to that. Obviously, he shows flashes. This is a guy with a ton of skill, but he really just hasn't shown the ability to be a consistent play driver offensively. It seems like he lacks confidence. Should we blame the Rangers for that? Probably a little bit, but I do feel like Kaapo Kakko has to shoulder some of that blame as well. He did come into the NHL in kind of a unique situation. Usually guys that are selected, 1st and 2nd overall, their first couple seasons in the NHL, they're not playing on a good team, and they get an opportunity to play consistent top 6 minutes and get looks on the power play, and in general just have a longer leash. And that really hasn't been the case for Kaapo Kakko at all throughout his tenure with the New York Rangers, because coming into the NHL, immediately he was placed on a team with playoff aspirations. In my opinion, at this point, a change of scenery is what would be best for Kaapo Kakko at this point in his career. I'd like to see him go to a team like maybe the Chicago Blackhawks, the San Jose Sharks, somewhere where he'll just be able to play a lot more loose, a lot more free, and not have all that pressure on him of trying to live up to being a 2nd overall draft pick with the team that drafted him. If the Rangers do end up moving him at some point this offseason, I'm definitely not expecting them to get some insane haul in return, but I think he's a guy who definitely still has some value. Only 23 years old, obviously being a former 2nd overall draft pick, and only being 1 season removed from an 18-goal, 40-point season, there's going to be some teams interested, but at this point, I feel like a Kaapo Kakko trade, more than anything, would just be the New York Rangers really doing him a favor and giving him an opportunity to go somewhere where he'll just have a fresh start. Continuing on now, the next player on my list is Adam Boqvist, 23-year-old right shot defenseman for the Columbus Blue Jackets. He was the 8th overall draft pick back in 2018 by the Chicago Blackhawks. He was traded to Columbus as part of the Seth Jones trade, and here we are almost 6 years after Boqvist was drafted 8th overall back in 2018. He's still really never been able to hit his stride at the NHL level. He's been plagued with injuries throughout his career, currently finds himself on a pretty crowded Columbus Blue Jackets blue line, especially the right side. Even after trading Andrew Peeke at the deadline this past season, you still got Damon Severson, Eric Branson, David Juracek, and Adam Boqvist. He only wound up playing in 35 games with the Blue Jackets this season. He was a healthy scratch back in November. Like I said, injuries have plagued him throughout his career, and that was the case again this past season. But when healthy, Boqvist is a guy who should be in the lineup and getting consistent minutes on the power play. Does his game have its flaws? Definitely, he struggles defensively, he's not great in his own end, but we knew this coming into the 2018 draft. What Adam Boqvist is an uber-talented offensive defenseman with a fantastic shot, great vision. He scored at over a half-point per game pace with the Blue Jackets in the 2022-23 season with 5 goals and 24 total points in 46 games. If healthy and given the opportunity to play consistent minutes and get looks on the power play, I think Boqvist is a guy who's capable of putting up 50-plus points in a season, similar to what I said about Capo Caco. I'd love to see Boqvist go to a team like San Jose, who honestly at this point just needs warm bodies for their blue line. Boqvist would, I think, immediately become the most talented player on their blue line if they were to acquire him. It was reported recently that the San Jose Sharks are interested in a veteran top 4 defenseman, and while Boqvist isn't a veteran at just 23 years old, I do think he would be a very viable option for a team in a similar position to San Jose. Play him in a top 4 role, see if he can, round out his game a little bit better and improve in the defensive zone, but give him the keys to the power play and see what happens. Moving along now to the next player on my list, we have Jonathan Berggren of the Detroit Red Wings, a 23-year-old winger who is a second-round draft pick, 33rd overall by Detroit back in 2018. I've talked about Berggren quite a bit throughout the course of this past season, and I've been pretty vocal about the fact that I don't want Detroit to trade Berggren, but ultimately I do feel like that's what's going to end up happening. It was reported back in early December that the Red Wings were engaged in trade talks, and Jonathan Berggren was one of the pieces involved in those trade talks, and although it was never reported that Berggren actually came out and requested a trade, I would not be surprised at all if this is a guy who's frustrated with his current positioning within the organization. Ever since being drafted by the Red Wings in the second round back in 2018, Berggren has excelled everywhere he's played. His final season in the SHL, 45 points in 49 games. In the 2021-22 season, as a rookie with Grand Rapids, actually led the team in scoring with 21 goals and 64 points in 70 games. And then in the 2022-23 season, he actually played the majority of the year in the NHL with the Red Wings, and he was one of their more efficient point producers at 5-on-5. 67 games played, 15 goals, 28 points while playing very limited minutes, and after producing like that in his rookie season, I figured that Berggren had seen the last of the American Hockey League, but I was wrong. He didn't even make the Red Wings opening night roster this past season, lost out on a roster spot to some veterans that the Red Wings brought in free agency like Daniel Sprong and Christian Fischer, with the exception of a 12-game stint with the Red Wings where, again, Berggren was very productive, half point per game in very limited minutes. Berggren played the majority of this past season in the American Hockey League where he dominated 56 points in 53 games, also had 10 points in 9 playoff games. I feel like we're at the point with Berggren where he really doesn't have anything left to prove in the American Hockey League. This is a guy who deserves consistent middle 6 minutes at the NHL level. I'd like him on the power play as well. He's undersized, but he's a great playmaker, and he's really good at creating space. He's patient with the puck on his stick. If the Red Wings don't plan on giving Berggren consistent minutes in the NHL this upcoming season, then I feel like for Berggren's sake, they should probably just move him somewhere where he's going to get an opportunity to play at the NHL level consistently. I think he's earned that. Again, I don't want the Red Wings to trade him because I feel like the first team to give him an opportunity to take the ball and run with it at the NHL level, he is going to thrive, but it's really just starting to feel like that team is not going to be Detroit. Moving along now to the next player on my list. This is an obvious one, Arthur Kaliev of the Los Angeles Kings, a 22-year-old winger who was a second-round draft pick, 33rd overall by the Kings in 2019. It's out there. It's public information that Arthur Kaliev and his agent have formally requested a trade from the Los Angeles Kings, and I think it makes sense. The LA Kings are a very deep team up front. They're in their contention window. They're trying to win right now, and there's just not a whole lot of opportunity for someone like Arthur Kaliev to, be given a long leash and to be able to play through his mistakes. He started really hot this past season, 7 points in his first 10 games, but only ended up finishing with 15 in 51 games, was a healthy scratch on a very consistent basis, and when Arthur Kaliev was in the lineup for the LA Kings this past season, he was given very limited minutes, and I don't think this is the kind of player that's really going to thrive in a fourth line checking role. He's a skilled winger with a very heavy shot, someone who I think can be an absolute weapon on the power play if given the opportunity. I think he has all the tools to be a 25 to 30 goal scorer in the NHL. It just doesn't seem like he's ever going to develop into that player in LA, and I think Kaliev realized that, and that's what led to him requesting a trade. David Pagnotta of the Fourth Period did report that Rob Blake does intend to fulfill Kaliev's trade request. He's going to look to move him, so it seems like he's going to be moved at some point this offseason, and I think that's definitely what's best for him at this point in his career. Continuing on now to the next player on my list, we have Oliver Wahlstrom of the New York Islanders, 23-year-old winger, the 11th overall pick by the Islanders from the 2018 NHL draft, and I feel like he kind of finds himself in a similar position to Arthur Kaliev, finds himself as a young, skilled winger on a team that's in their contention window, has never really gotten the opportunity to play anything more than fourth line minutes for an extended period of time. Wahlstrom has had a couple of stints in the NHL where he's shown flashes of being a productive player, around a half point per game in 2020-21 and in 2022-23, but this past season his production really fell off, just 6 points in 32 games, averaging only a little over 11 minutes per game. Wahlstrom did get a look on the Islanders' third line for some games after Patrick Waugh took over as head coach. It didn't last long, and after that brief stint on the Islanders' third line, Lou Lamoriello had some things to say about Wahlstrom. He said, "For Oliver, a lot has to do with confidence. He did get prime time, so to speak, but we still believe in him. Every game, every shift that we have, and every game that we play is important, so we have to go with the best lineup." So Lou Lamoriello says that the Islanders still believe in Oliver Wahlstrom, but he's going to be 24 next season, and I feel like we're kind of getting to the point where if he's just going to be a healthy scratch more often than not, like he was this past season, it's probably time to move on from him and give him an opportunity to go somewhere and see if he can make something of his career somewhere else. And now finally, finishing out the video with the last player on my list, we have Ville Heinola, 23-year-old defenseman for the Winnipeg Jets. He was their 20th overall selection from the 2019 NHL draft. This season was actually the first time in Heinola's career since being drafted where he didn't play any NHL games. You know, every season after being drafted prior to this year, he at least had a brief stint in the NHL for the Jets. This is a guy who has been up and down a lot throughout his career so far. He has excelled as a top pairing defenseman in the American Hockey League, and I feel like for the most part, every time he's had brief stints in the NHL for the Jets, he's looked good as well. It looked like there was a good chance that Heinola was finally going to, make the Jets out of training camp and be a full-time member of the team this season, but he fractured his ankle in one of their last preseason games, so he's had some pretty rough luck throughout his career so far. A lot of false starts. There's been times where, he's been called up to the Jets and it looks like he should probably stay there, but they send him back down. But one thing that's remained consistent is no matter where Ville Heinola's played, he's played really well. And I think, almost 5 years after being drafted now, this is a guy who's definitely earned an extended look in the NHL. And who knows, maybe he's going to get that extended look in the NHL with Winnipeg this upcoming season, as the Jets only have 4 defensemen signed through next season. But if not, I feel like it's probably time to move on from Heinola and send him somewhere where he's going to get the opportunity to play consistently in the NHL for longer stretches than just, brief 9 or 10 game stints. So that is going to wrap up today's video. That is my list of some younger NHL players that I really believe would benefit from a change of scenery at this point in their careers. Like I said at the beginning of the video, if there's any players that you think I missed, be sure to let me know who those players are and why down below in the comments. If you guys got all the way here to the end of the video and you ended up enjoying, please remember to leave the video a like. It definitely does help out a ton, and it's the best way to let me know that you enjoyed. And most importantly, if this was your first time checking out the channel and you want NHL content just like this all year round, hit that subscribe button, and I will talk to you all again soon.